Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dana Washington, and welcome to our live conversation today on resilience for Black leaders at work and beyond. This conversation is an initiative of the Black Professionals Employee Resource Group at the Center for Creative Leadership, and it's designed to be useful for both Black professionals and organizations interested in better understanding the challenge of resilience and well-being for Black professionals at their organizations. Our panelists today have been brought together in part because of their professional experience and background, their ability to thrive amidst the challenges that Black leaders face, and their unique perspectives on resilience as Black professionals. So I'd like to take a moment for each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So let's start with you, Fara.
Thank you, Dana. It's so good to be here with Marcia and Harrison. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Fara Francis, CCL's Chief Information Officer, and my resilient practice daily is around fitness and getting enough sleep.
Good. Thank you. Harrison, how about you?
Thanks, Dana. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Harrison Sturdivant. I am a strategic business partner working in our business development and sales group. One of my strategies is listening to music that inspires me and also gives me energy.
Awesome. Thank you. And Marcia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcia Dawkins. I'm a senior research scientist here at the Center for Creative Leadership. And my number one resilience strategy is also listening to music, but learning how to DJ. I think in my next life, that's who I'll be.
I can attest to Marcia's love for music. She frequently shares music with her coworkers here at CCL. And my name, again, is Dana Washington. I'm a leadership solutions partner here at the Center for Creative Leadership, and my personal resilience strategy is walking. I take a daily walk, whether it's 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, as a way to both de-stress, recharge, and also get a little exercise. So welcome today for this conversation. Let's get started. So the definition of resilience that we use here at the Center for Creative Leadership is the capacity of a system, enterprise, or individual to respond adaptively to challenges while maintaining core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changing circumstances. I think we can all relate to that, and we know what that feels like. So the pandemic impacted everyone professionally, personally, and as a result, many employers began thinking about the workplace and workers in a more holistic way. And for the first time here at CCL, we saw organizations addressing and trying to help employees manage burnout, and especially considering those significant stressors brought on by the pandemic. Concerns about health and safety, financial strain, and of course, all of the loss of our daily routines, the loss of our social interactions, and most tragically, death and losing the people that we love. Now, as we move through the pandemic and life starts to get back to normal, it's still incredibly stressful. And we're all looking for ways to build personal resilience and combat burnout and cope with mental health issues that are going to remain with us no matter what. Now, that's a little different for Black leaders because resilience is much more than managing burnout at work. To be successful, Black leaders have had to endure racism and discrimination and micro and macro aggressions, institutional and socioeconomic inequalities. All of that we have to endure just to get on the playing field, which was never level to begin with, and it still isn't. So there have been significant changes for us, yes, but Black and minority leaders are carrying all of this with them when they come into work each day, yet still being successful and thriving and helping others in spite of the pounds of external pressure that's put on them. So from early on, many Blacks and minorities were told by our families that in order to succeed, we had to be twice as good to overcome these factors that are well out of our control. We also had to be strong enough to get through all of those challenges and keep going. The expectation from ourselves and from others, especially those that came before us and had to survive and overcome even more, is that we're just going to have a lot of grit and we're just going to be resilient, that we're just going to keep going and we're going to bounce back no matter what the obstacles are. Now, here at CCL, we think about resilience a lot. And our colleague Pete Ronier makes the point that there are two types of resilience. There's that bounce back grit type that Black leaders are very, very familiar with. And then there's the energy management, resilience as recharge, self-care type that a lot of people, Blacks in particular, may not necessarily be good at. And the need to bounce back often means that we don't show or tell our struggle or trauma. Instead, we endure these things, and we often endure them in silence. Now, this is counterintuitive to our well-being, and it's reflected in the considerable health challenges that we face in our community. The two types are powerfully connected, though. So the need to focus on our well-being and recharge and care for ourselves is as vital to both our success and our survival. So at CCL, we refer to this kind of resilience recharge as burning bright, as opposed to burning out. CCL's Black Professional Employee Resource Group has provided a support network within our organization as a place where Black leaders can recharge and sustain their well-being in the workplace and where they can be their authentic selves. And with our members and guests today, we want to share some resilience strategies with you, but also talk about boundaries for how much you can carry, for how much you should carry, and the fact that we have a choice. We have a choice to keep going and take on more, or to stop and take care of our own selves and our own well-being. So I do want to share that we are going to be providing you with some resources to support you in your own resilience well-being journey, and that's going to be dropped in our chat, okay? So let's get started with our first question. For our panel, how have you maintained or implemented resilience practices in your own lives? And what can you recommend for our audience if they're still figuring that out for themselves? And audience, if you have some go-to resilience practices, please put those in the chat. So panel, what have you done to maintain your resilience practices?
Marcia?
Sure.
I went
Thanks,
first. I went first earlier.
I appreciate that call out, Fara, because it speaks directly to something I'm working hard on, which is to be present as much as possible, right? And so to focus less on always having to be prepared, always having to be twice or three times as good, and really being able to focus, to prepare, to be present in the moment so that I can listen to what others are saying and listen to myself and respond to those needs with care. So being present for me is key at the moment. Thanks for that shout out, Fara.
Absolutely. Well, I was intrigued by your DJ skills, so for me, it's a combination. I mentioned earlier about fitness, and I mentioned about get enough sleep. But I also tap into my faith and get a lot into early morning inspirational reading to ground me. In addition, when it comes to resilience with dealing with work issues, I have built a great network of individuals to whom I can connect to help bring some ideas to me and give me some clarity, etc. And in terms of resilience, when it comes to really some significant pressures, I turn to my family as well for that support system. And when I want to have some fun, to just blow some steam out, there's a mix of I do salsa dancing, or I'm a Caribbean woman, so I do my Caribbean music. As Harrison mentioned, his music to inspire him. I do the music to just lift me up and to get me going. But I really feel it's a three-prong for me: the fitness with the mind and the body, and the inspirational piece, and my network. And we can get into that later. I really feel that my network has served a very great purpose in driving me to stay within, I should use the word sanity from time to time.
Yeah.
Love that. Love the mind-body inspiration connection, Fara. Yeah. Thank you. How about you, Harrison?
Yeah, it sounds like we have a lot in common, from the music to the rest. And for me, it's come down to just being intentional, really, and listening to what my body is telling me, which for a long time I struggled with. Taking more time to listen and basically trust myself in order to take care of myself. So for a long while, I would push past difficult situations or through mental and physical fatigue, which led to other personal challenges. So now when I'm feeling stressed or fatigued or what have you, I try to take just a moment for myself. So, for example, with what you mentioned, Dana, earlier about Burn Bright, one of the practices I've been using is really taking a midday nap.
Wow.
And I'm not talking about a 30-minute, hour. I'm talking 7 to 10 minutes. And which seems strange with that amount of time, but I'm able to set my alarm clock for 15 minutes. And within a few minutes, I'm asleep. And when I wake up, I'm refreshed and I'm able to recharge the batteries. And it really gives me a boost for what I need.
Wow, Harrison, I am a fellow power napper. I've got it down to a science, 10 minutes. I don't even need an alarm. I don't know how it happened. Something happened when I had kids and I was able to develop that skill. But all of these strategies are so helpful. And coming back to the body and really taking care of our physical selves seems to be at the root of a lot of that. And, as I said in the introduction, all of the health challenges that typically plague the Black community often are usually born out of stress and not being able to manage that stress. But just hearing how you have developed the skill to stay present, how you've developed the skill to listen to your body and take breaks when needed, and to find ways to reach out and connect and recharge either through activities or through other people. These are all just amazing suggestions, and you all seem to be doing them so well. So I would ask you, what would you recommend for our audience as they're still trying to figure out how to adopt those practices for themselves? What would you suggest to them?
Well, I just love, Harrison, that you can take a nap. You should actually do a class on that, because I could never nap 10, 15 minutes, not at all. But to the audience, I do think a bit of groundingness. I like what Marcia said, with intentionality. You said, I want to be present. I do like that. I think that being more cognizant of that is very important. But with the pandemic, we observed that so many people develop a couple of health issues, and I see a bit of fitness/nutrition is helpful, and also making sure you tap into your network. But pay attention to the mind for sure, and also to the body to help in the space of resilience, and also just lean in sometimes to the issues that you're facing. I found that sometimes we wish to run off and try to solve, but sometimes you may want to sit for a bit and learn and grow from the experience.
I'll piggyback there if I may. Fara, I love what you said. And for me, it comes down to like the 2 R's, I call them, to recover and to record, right? So to recover from what is ailing me means that I have to acknowledge what's going on in my life. And so much through those practices that Fara and Harrison have talked about this morning, and really allowing myself to grieve for what I've lost, whether it's health-based or in any other aspect of life, if I've lost a person due to the pandemic or anything else. And then to record that, to not just, grin and bear it, but to actually, for me, it'll be writing it down or making a playlist about it, right? And really kind of going through that process, which then allows me to imagine something new and imagine something different for myself.
Love it.
Love that. So there's so much intentionality around managing stress and building resilience. It doesn't seem to happen on its own, right? You have to be very thoughtful about building these practices for yourself, and more importantly, continuing to practice those practices or those strategies. Let me ask you this, because Fara, you mentioned this in your points about your network. And if you could talk a little bit about how you build a supportive network. That's a question we've got that's come through the chat that I think would be a good one to double click on.
Absolutely. I am a big proponent of building a good network and having a great network. And it could look like professionals from your industry or your work. And it could also look like just a kitchen cabinet of individuals from different walks of life, be it your pastor, a lawyer, an accountant, etc., but just a bunch of advisors to guide you. Because in this network, when you're trying to build resilience, you really want to find the right people to support you. You want someone who can give you like tactical, technical decision-making skills, want someone who you can vent with, someone whom you can cry with, someone you could be very vulnerable with. So you got to know who to turn to during the right time. But building your network is critically important. And for me, networking requires a three-pronged framework I came up with: build, connect, and nurture. Because the nurturing piece requires reciprocity. The connection piece requires you to make the leap and connect with people, reach out and put yourself out there to connect with others who you wish to support you. And just building it means getting out there and really seeking help. And note, help may not come from folks who look like you. So you have to remain open-minded as to how you build your network, because help can come from different parts and from different people. And it has happened in my life. And I feel that I read somewhere research has shown that the most successful people are the most connected people, or the reverse, the most connected people are the most successful people. I truly believe that my network showed up for me when I was out of jobs, when I needed advice as to a job I needed to make a decision on. I feel that they really showed up for me, and I have always been a big proponent of networking. And I do encourage all professionals to build your network, connect with it, nurture it, keep reaching out and supporting them as they support you. And that will also help in giving you confidence and, in essence, help elevate your resilience muscle, so to speak.
Mhm. Good. Marcia, Harrison, what about you? How do you turn to your networks when you need a little bit of a resilience boost or a recharge?
Go ahead, Harrison.
Yep. For me, there's our work networks. There's our external networks, and for me internally, it's turning to folks that are. Sometimes I just need help, and it's reaching out to those that I've connected with before, asking them if there's anybody else that I should have knowledge of or would be able to help me in other situations. So sometimes it's just me asking for those connections or asking for advice through those connections, which then sometimes lead to unexpected positive outcomes, meaning you find that you have more in common with folks, the more folks you meet, that kind of thing. But then, of course, externally, there's community organizations, churches, for me, with whom I connect with to find other inspiration, other similar mindsets, et cetera, to help me from a spiritual standpoint. Yeah. So there's just a number of different ways that I've found it's been helpful for me to expand my network to find some sense of support, advice, and even mentorship when I need that.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's the same as everyone else has said. For me, my network has really taught me the power of like collective self-interest and understanding the importance of we, so that when one of us succeeds, we all succeed in different ways. We continue to look out for each other, whether that's, a network of, other academics and fellow research nerds for me, whether that's a spiritual network, whether that's my family. And in my own case, I think about my ancestors as an important part of that network too, right? What can we learn from our ancestors who were formerly enslaved, right? About resilience that brings us here today and still has so much more to teach us as well.
I really love the holistic view of what your network is, whether it's people within your industry, people within your organization, people from past organizations, your spiritual network, the church, the people that you work with or inspire you. And I love bringing in ancestors, right? Because when we think about what sustains us and keeps us going, it's really knowing the struggles of the people that came before us, that we can endure so much because of what they've endured before us too. So beautiful points. I think all of that points back to having a well to go back to withdraw from, right? When you need a boost, when you need a lift, when you're thirsty for something, you need a well, whatever that well is for you. You need to establish that well for yourself as a source, as a font of resilience. Mm-hmm. So when we think about resilience for Black leaders and minority leaders in general, we keep going, right? No matter what the challenges are, no matter how hard things are, no matter how difficult things are for us. But what I'm starting to think about, and I've been reading this wonderful book. I believe it's oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. The Rest is Manifesto. I've got it in our link. I totally blanked on it. But this book is essentially saying that yes, we're resilient. Yes, we're gritty. Yes, we bounce back and keep going. But should we? Should we stop and take a pause? So, do you think that our resilience benefits us? Or can it possibly hurt us as Black leaders?
I will say this. Having resilience is great, but it's a tool as well. And you have to know when to use it and how to balance it. And so, again, it's really important to distinguish between, should I really lean into this issue and fight and go through and get gritty about it and dig in? Or should I pretty just lay back? It becomes problematic when it affects us mentally, where we think we are superhuman and we begin to think, we're trying to go to the most perfect place, perfectionism, so to speak, when we don't ask for help, when we don't reach out. And so it becomes a negative effect for us. And I have stories to share on both sides of that, where I dug in and I became successful at the end of the issue. And then I have stories where I decided, no, I'm not going to dig in. I'm just going to take care of Fara and walk away from it. So I'll say this, it's a great tool, being resilient, but knowing when and how to use it is the difference. And you have to listen to your mind and listen to your inner being as to whether or not it is really worth it to keep being gritty and being Miss Superwoman, and just sit back and let it and learn from it and just move on.
Thank you, Fara.
Yeah, Dana, I think I tend to agree. I think it tends to be both of these, not one or the other, meaning it's not benefit or harmful. I think it's both here in this situation, at least the way I view it. Absolutely, our ability to remain resilient through all the personal traumas we endure, the systematic ills we face, and the community challenges we push for certainly benefit us. However, just like we say sometimes, anything worth fighting for, anything worth having is worth fighting for. So we ultimately end up with some wounds along the way. So being in community with one another, like our Black ERG and other communities that we have the opportunity to connect with, is very important to help heal some of those wounds and overcome some of those challenges.
I would agree completely and say I think those things work together, right? So when we think about what comes out of that resilience, these expressions of grief and pain, right, that are beautiful music, that are beautiful poems, like by Lucille Clifton, right? The best gospel songs and spirituals, or the best rap lyrics, right, are all about bringing those two things together and acknowledging them at the same time. That this resilience is an amazing legacy that we have, but also if left unchecked, right, can have some harmful effects.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate you, Marcia, saying it's an amazing legacy. And to your point earlier, when we think of our ancestors, right? Like for me, when I think of my parents and how they were resilient in raising 8 kids well together, and just leaving a wonderful legacy for us. And I'm just so happy to hear you say that, right? And to your point, Harrison, about sometimes it can harm us, right? But we are told and are shown to be resilient and to be strong and to keep fighting and just go through with it. But we really have to stop and think, as I said earlier, I can't help but reinforce this. Hey, sometimes you need to stop and listen to yourself and say, you know what, this is no longer worth it for me. Mm-hmm. It's not serving me well. And right. I knew I made a big decision with that when I realized that I had to make a decision about a past job. And my confidence was being chipped away daily by that former CEO at another job. And I thought, I don't need this anymore. I knew I had what it takes to fight and win that, but I realized why bother? So that was the moment where I sat back and said, no, I don't need to be big, strong Fara. Let's just move on and learn from it, grow from it, journal it, and just keep moving on. So thank you.
Recover and record.
There you go. Recover and record.
And if I may, speaking of that, Fara, you remind me, And this poem has been on my mind lately, just thinking about what we're going to be talking about today, by Lucille Clifton. It's my favorite poem in the world, and it's called Won't You Celebrate With Me? And we'll put it in the chat. But what you said there reminds me of the last line of her poem. And she says, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Right? And your story reminds me of that. So thank you for sharing that this morning.
You're welcome.
I think we are all a testament to that last line. Honestly, that's beautiful. You know, any strength that is overused can become a weakness, right? And I think the same goes for bouncing back, for being gritty. If you continue to just bounce back and not take those pauses and not stop and kind of sit in it and question whether or not I should just keep going. I think that point you made, Fara, was a really good one, that, you know, you weren't being treated well. And a lot of times we think we just keep going. We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to push through, right? But at what point do we stop? At what point do we say that's enough? And where do we draw that line? And can being too good at bouncing back, right? Can that hurt us? Can that be something that damages us? What do you think about that?
Yes. Harrison, please.
Okay, yeah. No, it's interesting. Can we be too good at bouncing back or
just keeping on?
Yeah. So I tend to think the way you even defined it earlier, I will say, the way you defined that, I don't know that us being able to bounce back and maintain our integrity and purpose, I think was the words that you used, Dana. I don't know that we can be too good at that. But we do have to be, as we've been talking about this, we do have to be careful that we don't allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. As far as you just pointed out, can't allow that to happen, or we take on too much in some situations. We're overtaxed or overburdened. We're carrying too much. I think all those things could be a result of being too good at being resilient. So with that, for me, it goes back to be intentional about setting those boundaries. You know, there comes a point to what you just described, for there come to a point where folks have crossed the line, or something has crossed the line, and we need to be aware of that and set it up for ourselves to protect ourselves. You know, or in some cases, maybe it's asking for help.
Right.
We're pushing through on our own, and we think we're by ourselves, but really there's somebody maybe even close by to us that could be helping us with that. So I think it's a combination of those things that we just need to be aware of, and establishing those boundaries to protect ourselves.
I just love how you said crossing the line, and it's so true. That's sometimes what it boils down to. If things go way beyond where it's acceptable to you, it challenges your ethics, your personal integrity, your personal who you are, your personal brand, frankly speaking. And you're right. I mean, Dana, yes, it's sometimes if we're too good at bouncing back, then we never get a chance to learn. We never get a chance to grow from the experience. I truly believe that each of us has had to do some level of fighting back to move ahead, right? This is why we are where we are in our lives. And once you've had that history of always fighting back and winning, when the moment comes for you to decide maybe it's time to move on, that's the tug. But I did it before and it worked. Maybe I can fight again. But you have to come to that realization that, wait a minute, this is really tearing me down, and let me not try to be Miss Grit and Grind and just go pow, just trying to get through. And so you're right, Harrison, sometimes when it crosses the line, and I felt that had happened in my story, and I knew it was time for me to move on. I feel also that there is this whole area where you have to give yourself grace and allow others to see that you're respecting yourself that much to walk away. And I do feel that in the medium to long run, those individuals who are challenging you, that situation around it, people will say, wait a minute, I have respect for Harrison. He made the right choice and he moved on. Mm-hmm. For him, he did something for himself. That's what
You know, we got a comment in the chat, I think it was Shar who said, do I choose to fight or do I choose myself?
I love
Right.
that. Yeah.
And I think that's a great question to ask yourself in that moment, to gauge how much should I bounce back from this, or how much should I just let go? And I think that's a wonderful reframe. So for those of you who are out there trying to just kind of figure out your own resilience, I want to know if you feel like you have a choice, because a lot of times we don't have choices, right? We have bills to pay, we have families to support.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the privilege or the means to just give up and walk away. So in that situation, right, where we're absorbing more because we have to in order to survive and only in order to keep going. But how can we help our listeners today understand that they have a choice? What is it that you might be able to offer in advice to helping people understand that they do have a choice? Wow, I stunted all of you.
It's such an excellent question.
It is.
Because it forces us to do what Harrison and Fara have been talking about, right? To forgive ourselves for those times when we may not have realized we had a choice, and also to acknowledge how we've been complicit, right, in our own burnout in this way. And so for me, I'll answer it this way. Like, if I could go back to like my 18 or 22-year-old self, and by the way, I'm only 25.
Of course.
I would tell her to really do two things. One is understand the first time that something happens, that it's time to pause and assess and reassess, and not wait for the 4th or the 5th or the 18th time. And the second thing goes back to that power of network and community that we talked about a few minutes ago, right? Who are my trusted advisors that I can go to, who will not be concerned with telling me what I want to hear, but actually tell me the truth, right? And so one of those true things is you always have a choice, but are you too afraid to take it? Are you too afraid for the consequences of that choice, good or bad? So that would be the beginning of my answer to that question.
Oh, Marcia, that's such a good answer. And I want to double click on what you said, because Maya Angelou says the same thing. Believe someone when they show you who they are the first time, right? Yeah. First time. And take note. Take note when you experience it the first time, and just kind of put that in the bank of your memory so that you can start to make your decisions based on that action that somebody has shown you, right? What their character or what their expectations are of you. And that also leads into a question that was in our chat there too, about sharing a piece of advice that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your career. So thank you so much, Marcia. Anyone else? What are some other ways that we can help our listeners?
I need to respond to what you just said with Maya Angelou. It reminds me of my late mom. May she rest in peace. She always told us growing up, know who you have dealings with and act accordingly. And basically she was saying, once you've figured out who people are and how they're conducting themselves with you, you're good. You know now how to move and how to move forward. So thank you for lifting that up, Marcia and Dana. Regarding the choice, you know what, everyone has a choice. It's all about where you are in life and how much you can take on with that choice. We all come to this world and to our careers with different skill sets, different experiences, different strengths, different sort of levels of weaknesses. And, you know, one of the things we tend to do, as we were saying earlier, is really lose ourselves in trying to be gritty and trying to get it done. But we have a choice. And this is how you use it, and use the power of your resilience. I feel if you choose to step out of the game, that doesn't make you less resilient. It just makes you more developing self-awareness, better self-awareness muscles. So sometimes you have to sit into it and learn from it, but know that you do have a choice for your wellness, a choice for your integrity, a choice for your respect as well. So yes, there is a choice, but know this, whatever choice you use, you are still strong and you're still enough and you're still resilient, but you're just making a different choice for that moment in time.
I think that's we are in the midst of hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
We might be transitioning out of hustle culture. I think the pandemic made a lot of people stop and say, why am I hustling like this? But I think in this hustle culture environment of like, I got to rise and grind, I got to go get it, that stop and pause and realizing that you do have a choice on how you wish to hustle or how much you wish to hustle, I think is a great question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Harrison?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dana, that is, as you were reflecting, Marcia, on your younger self and what you would say to that individual, I was reflecting on what you just mentioned, Dana, this hustle culture and this maybe it's, family, what we see our family doing, by not just the immediate family, but our extended family doing, what we see other folks that look like us doing in terms of this whole hustle culture. For me, it was, I have to do this almost on my own. And now looking back, I wish I would have tapped into that network that Fara, you mentioned, right? Tapping into all the benefits that you get from that, not just at work, but externally, et cetera, to help ease some of those stresses and those challenges that I had. And that's what I would say. I think sometimes we get lost in I work so hard and valuing that versus working more smart in terms of using the network, using the community that we have at our fingertips. But sometimes it's just getting the courage to either ask or put yourself out there a little bit so that you can benefit from those experiences.
Put yourself out there. Harrison, such a great point, because we try to go through and do everything on our own. And we've been told you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? Like that's the line we've all been fed, and you got to do it by yourself. But if we work as a collective, if we do form those networks, if we do support each other and encourage each other, it's a lot easier to get through it all, and probably without all the health impacts and the danger to our own well-being at the same time. So thank you. A couple of questions are coming in from our listeners today, some really good ones. So I want to pose these questions to you. How should organizations think about resilience differently to better support Black professionals?
How can organizations think differently
about resilience? To better support Black professionals. I mean, I think what we've done here is we've pulled the curtain back, right? And for some organizations, this could be completely new information for them, like all the stuff that we as Black leaders are showing up with every day, not knowing that we've got to go through all those hurdles just to show up on the playing field. So it kind of, now that we've provided that information, we've provided that insight, what can they do differently? How can they think about resilience differently for the Black professionals in their organizations?
I think they can start by being more than just cosmetic with their talk and thinking about resilience. And when I say that, I mean they can move to having conversations like the one we're having, and to really demonstrating some commitment about resilient. And so what does resilient commitment look like? It means talking to leaders of Black ERGs. It means having a community within the organization beyond just the ERG, right, where these kind of issues can get discussed. So I think that's the beginning of it. We can begin moving from cosmetics to conversation with the goal of having some commitment.
So I was thinking along the lines of what Marcia said. For one, look, here we are. We have created this Black Professionals ERG. So this is a good start, right? We've created this this network of Black professionals for this organization. But as Marcia said, go beyond that as well and create opportunities and forums to broaden the conversation with action, and not just have a talk, but with action. When you see, I know CCL has books on resilience, but if we look at I think it's a core framework within CCL, how can we educate and drive a momentum to ensure that there is a space for resilience for Black professionals or Black employees as well. So it's just not, as Marcia said, not just the talk, but if we can get some action out of it. And it also will involve helping our people managers as well to recognize the importance of leaving and creating that space. And I don't know if that's the right word, space, but creating the opportunity ensure that the Black professionals of the organization can be resilient or know how to move ahead, etc. I mean, that's what I'm thinking along those lines.
Yeah, I agree with everything you all are saying about how organizations might need to think differently. And what comes to mind for me would be about the Black Black resource groups. I realize not every organization has that. And so if that is the case, then the question becomes, why is that? Is it because there's a lack of trust? We don't have as much control. We think we already have everything figured out. We're in a great space. But I think for me, what I believe organizations should be looking at is, are you creating at every turn ways that people can feel that they have a space of belonging, a safe space of belonging, a safe space to share their experiences together? I would think every organization would want something like that for their professionals. And so if that is the case, then that's what I would encourage and even challenge every organization to do, is to venture into those spaces and create those spaces, because what we've seen at CCL is it's been tremendous for us to find a source of belonging, a source of networking, as we've been talking about, and a place where we can share the experience and help and advocate for one another.
I think all of you, go on, Fara.
I just want to say thank you, Dana. I love, Harrison, that you mentioned a space for belonging. It's so critically important. Yes, equity, diversity, and inclusion, but belonging is such a big piece of what needs to be felt in most organizations. So thank you for raising that. Yeah. Appreciate it.
And specifically around equity, diversity, and inclusion, you know, in the last couple of years here at CCL, our work with clients in that area has increased exponentially, specifically since the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, and with the pandemic highlighting and bringing forth kind of all the inequities, right? So our work in that area has increased, but one thing that we've consistently said to our clients and to the participants in the room is that this is not the work of Black people to do. This is the responsibility of the entire organization, specifically the people who are not Black, because they are often the decision makers. They are often the ones creating the policies that impact the workers, that may or may not make the work environment a little bit more stressful or more challenging for them. So really thinking holistically about the systems that we're working in and how we are treating people equitably and creating space for diversity and inclusion and belonging specifically, so that those resource groups specifically in CCL have created a space for belonging at a time when everyone was remote and everyone was virtual and the opportunities to connect and be in person were few and far between. So finding that time and space and creating those opportunities for people to connect and also create belonging has been essential for our well-being, I think, internally here within our ERG and within our organization and others as well.
Absolutely.
So another question coming from our chat is, do you ever feel like you need to get out of your own way? And if so, how do you do it?
Yes, I can go to this one right away. Yes, I have realized that I am mostly the person in my own way. And how did I come to that realization? How did I get out of it is a whole other story. But my quick answer is, I remember something my Cuban grandma used to say in Spanish, and the closest I've come to it in English is from the CEO, the current CEO of Essence magazine, who says, if you can't be who you are, where you are, you change where you are, not who you are. Right? And so what does that mean? For some people like my grandma, it means going to a different country. For some people like my American and African American ancestors, it means changing your physical location. In other words, making the organization have that sense of belonging, making the organization recognize who you are, not being invisible, making your presence felt in ways that are additive to the culture, and that can't be ignored. So that's how I've begun to do it. And I'm not all the way there. I'm still mostly in my way most of the time. But I think the first step is realizing it and admitting it, and then figuring out how you interact with your environment and and making the change accordingly.
Oh, Marcia,
Yeah.
that one hits home. That one hits home. That is, I love your grandmother already.
She was a tough little lady from New York City.
Thank you. Fara Harrison.
Oh, you mean to go ahead, Far?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. So for me, getting out of my own way, I typically use what I would call a trusted advisor or partner to, if I think that I'm dealing with something that I shouldn't be dealing with, or maybe I should continue to push forward, as we kind of talked about earlier. It's always helpful to have somebody that you trust to help check yourself, to make sure you're thinking correctly about whatever the case might be. Other ways that I think I've tried to use in terms of getting out of my own way is dealing with the stresses of life, the stresses of work, things like that. And sometimes knowing that you just need to turn things off. So whether that's the emails, through your phone or other technology, or just taking a vacation and really unplugging. So all those things I've found to be helpful, because there was a time in my life where I might have been on vacation technically, but I'm still working because I have my phone. And I found that on a trip with my family, I remember where I was in line at Disney World, getting on a ride. And here I am checking my phone. And I just realized, why am I doing this? I'm not really disconnecting. I'm not giving my all to my family. I need to check myself and fully disconnect. So from that moment, I've tried to use that as my system. For when I'm really gone, I'm gone. Then I need to manage myself to make sure that I'm not missing anything, once I'm away. But those are just a couple of ways that I try to, manage that to make sure that I'm showing up the best that I can.
Harrison, that's such a great point. And I know someone out there is thinking, yes, I feel the same way, but how do I do that? How do I disconnect? How do I pull the plug on myself, right?
Right.
We're the ones that are doing it. How do we stop ourselves? And you may not know the answer to that, but if you could share, like, what switched it for you? Yeah,
for me, it goes back to not really asking for help, but it goes back to relying on your network. So I'm not the only one that can do and get everything done. I work with a great team. And so from that, it takes me communicating with the team to let them know, hey, I need to take some time here. So, and I am open and transparent about that, and I will not be available. So sharing that, and then managing myself and my work to those dates that I know that I'm going to be away. And so what I found is, especially if I'm taking a vacation, I can do that. I have that in my control. And even if there's an emergency, I'm blessed with a great leadership group that knows if something comes up, they can step in and help, because they also are partnered with me in terms of my well-being. So I think for me, I can say that's been a way that I try to manage that, but I'm sure there's a ton of other options that one might use given their situation.
Harrison, that's a really great point, and it reminds me of something I heard years ago, which is the word no is a full sentence. Period. So figuring out where you draw that line and then pulling in the help of others and using your resources to help you stick to that no, I think are a really great way to draw a boundary and create some opportunities for yourself to be resilient.
Yeah.
Fara?
Oh, for me, I get in my way in my head big time, folks. I do. Sometimes I just just spinning out here in my brain if something happens on the job or I'm overthinking it. And what I do, I go to my coach. I've had the same executive coach for the last 4 years, and she is real with me and breaks it down for me and literally tells me the truth. And sometimes that truth isn't the best thing I want to hear. So I tap into her outside of my network. She's a very great resource to me to get out of my way. And sometimes that getting in your way bleeds into you feeling insecure, et cetera, et cetera. And so she's a great resource to help me as well. Something you said, Harrison, about turning off when you're away. It's something I really try hard to practice. So when I'm away, I turn off Outlook alerts so I wouldn't get sucked into it. But with my role in CCL, I know that I need to remain connected. So there's always WhatsApp if my team needs to reach me. But on the whole, I try to turn it off and to be focused and be in the moment of being off the grid, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things I do just to remain, disconnected, but still take care of my sense of peace and well-being.
Yeah.
Recently, I was away, and this is a funny story, quick story. I was overseas, and I couldn't remember for the life of me. I had just changed my AD password, and I couldn't remember my password to get into out. I just couldn't get into the system, and I just wanted to check email, which I knew I shouldn't. And do you know what? The day I was flying back to the US, I remembered it. It came back to me. So that was a sign. I felt bad because I'm head of IT. What is this? First time in my career, Marcia and Harrison, I had forgotten my AD password, and I think that was a sign that I was supposed to remain off the grid.
Right.
I agree with that. Sometimes it's a forced disconnection.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all so much for your time today, for your insights, for your wisdom. I personally feel very lucky to have colleagues like you that I get to work alongside who have such great insights and can offer support as part of my network. And just a couple key takeaways for all of our listeners today that I just pulled out of this conversation is that it's important when you are sitting within a challenge or faced with something that might be overly stressful, beyond the norm, it's important to really sit in that moment and be present in that moment so that you can make a choice about what your next action is. But if you're always moving through at 100 miles an hour, you don't stop and feel that presence. I think the next one is to recover and record. So once you kind of acknowledge what it is, take a moment to recover. Whatever it is you need to do to recharge, to bounce back, to reinvigorate yourself, to build that resilience, take that moment to recover, but then make sure you follow up and record what that experience was for you so that you can pull the wisdom out of it and also get some insights on what to do next. It's important to have a network that you can tap into, a truth council, if you will, people who are going to tell you honestly how you're showing up, what you might need to do next, what their experience has taught them that you can learn from. Having that network that you can tap into and rely on is going to buoy you and give you a well to go back to get lots of energy and draw from. And then finally, no is a complete sentence. Sometimes we got to say no and just draw those boundaries for ourselves. So thank you, Marcia, Fara, Harrison. I so enjoyed our time today. I hope you all did too today for our listeners. Thanks for joining the Center for Creative Leadership. And we are also, again, we've got a lot of resources that we are dropping in chat for you, links to articles, books, things from people that work here at CCL, including Fara, and some other brilliant folks that we've got within our Black Professionals ERG here at CCL. Thank you so much. Go recharge yourselves and have a great day.